there are only a few things in this world I would go the extra mile for in terms of entertainment. You know, a director like Quentin Tarantino, I'd go out to see his movies, um, or Christopher Nolan, or Hayao Miyazaki in this case, and sometimes it's even a studio. I would go out of my way to see, you know, a Trigger work or a Studio Ghibli work or a Madhouse work if it was, you know, pre 2011. But I've spent the last 3 months grinding out every single Studio Ghibli movie and arranging my thoughts on them in a manner that I think is appropriate. So here's me, someone who I think comes from a place of pure love for the studio, no matter, you know, what I think of their works. Um, I think that all of my criticisms are greatly, I guess, assembled in my mind because I've just thought about them for quite a long time, and I think I'll offer insight into what I think the studio has done for me personally, um, through me watching all of their films. So here's essentially my thesis through watching all of their films. It's that Studio Ghibli is at its best when it embraces the fantastical. If you look at most of their catalog, especially like even their early works, even Castle in the Sky and like Howl's Moving Castle, or you know, Grave of the Fireflies are super ambitious. They just offer you a lot in terms of setting, conceit, or you know, even some people would argue characters in some of their early movies. Just like there's so much to offer in these early movies that you really can't ask for more as a consumer, right? As a critic, you can definitely ask for more. You should always be asking for more. But the thing is I think that every single movie that embraces sort of a whimsicality to its overall, is ambiance the right word? I guess setting, taking its characters, you know, not as serious as you have to, and just sort of letting everything come together in, you know, coherency rather than trying to make too many points and get lost in those points is pretty much what I think is Studio Ghibli's, you know, bread and butter, right? And when you start with a movie like Castle in the Sky, right? You really have to think about it for a second, is that Castle in the Sky doesn't really offer a lot because Castle in the Sky isn't a lot. You have a pretty nonsensical plot that just revolves around random events happening, and you're, as the viewer, you're forced to just accept these random events happening as it occurs. And you also have two main characters who can't stop saying each other's names. The main girl character, whose name is Shita, gets said like a million times by the male character. Shita, Shita, just a million times for no reason. It's not the best introductory work, but it is a fine introductory work. I personally don't think the movie is even close to being good. I think it's sitting around a 4 for me right now. But I really can't help think that Castle in the Sky offered something that kickstarted Studio Ghibli, from the very beginning, especially because you have Hayao Miyazaki, who's coming off a hot streak pretty much, who previously directed Castle of Cagliostro and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. You have quite a man behind the production team, right? And it's not every day that a visionary like this comes around, because you know, you do have people who are already established figures like Isao Takahata, who is also co-founding the studio. Well, I guess there are four co-founders of Studio Ghibli, but the most important ones by far are Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, whose works will pretty much define Studio Ghibli through pretty much its entire duration, and it still has a duration at the moment. You know, Goro Miyazaki releases a movie here and there, but you also have Hayao Miyazaki working on what we can assume to be maybe one final film. It's called How Do You Live, or How Do We Live? I forgot what it's called, but I personally don't think we'll ever see that movie released because the man is old and he's probably trying to like not die before he works himself to death working on the film. But back to the beginning of Studio Ghibli, I think that Castle in the Sky is an alright film in terms of its animation, or I guess artwork, I should say. It's still gorgeous even to this day. Like it still triumphs over works you see today easily. It's not as impeccable as some of the other works might be. Ponyo, a very notable one. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, as compared to Castle in the Sky, but it's a good attempt, I think. Then, after Castle in the Sky, you have Grave of the Fireflies, which ideally offers interesting ideas, and it does. It does deliver on interesting ideas through this World War II plot at which, these two siblings, who are not very interesting but work for the conceit, experience bombings and live drastic, or have to take drastic measures to survive in this situation they're put in, and are forced to, commit ethical crimes or ethical dilemmas and think about the ethicality of their situation as well because of the Japanese government and, them stealing to survive. The brother especially has to, make these decisions for the sake of his brother, or sister, I forgot. They're siblings, that's all that really matters. But I think that although Isao Takahata does a good job on Grave of the Fireflies, I think that a movie that does it even better is Barefoot Gen, which by far has a way better art style, or I guess art director behind it. I forgot his name, but he's a really visionary art director. And then you also have other movies like In This Corner of the World, which are more recent, also doing a better job in the character department than I think that Grave of the Fireflies did. Because I think that what Grave of the Fireflies does is kind of present a situation that's already so terrible and already so depressive that the characters don't really matter, and then the world is what the viewer latches onto in that stead, because it's not as though the viewer can relate to these characters in a lot of ways. They can relate to the empathy. They can empathize with their situation, but that's a situation-based thing, not a character-based things. And that is the problem with the movie I have, because it's just sort of also how long is this movie? I think it's around it's an hour and 30, I think. And like most of the movie is kind of spent doing a lot of downtime, a lot of, sort of just hunting and providing sort of type thing for Seita, who's our main character. And he doesn't really, dominate the screen as much as you would like to see from a main protagonist in this situation. He doesn't present a lot of interesting ideas from him specifically. The ideas that are presented in the movie are strictly through him venturing out and seeing atrocities being committed or things happening that he might find disgusting, or we might find disgusting. And yeah, that's I think Grave of the Fireflies is a good movie. I think I gave it a 7 out of 10. It's not a great movie, but it's a better one than Castle in the Sky. Far better, actually. And if that was the debut movie of Studio Ghibli, I don't think anyone would have been disappointed. It would have been a little bit more artistically driven, though, I think, because and not to say that Castle in the Sky isn't artistically driven. I'm just saying that, like, I think Castle in the Sky was a better introductory movie, because if you start a studio off with something like Grave of the Fireflies, you're kind of alienating a massive part of your viewer base, especially if you're trying to make money, because animation in general, or animation studios in general, are a dying breed. Animators are worked to the bone. Pretty much every anime you create is non-profitable. So you have to find a way to appeal to the masses somehow. And if you started your, film catalog off with Grave of the Fireflies, it's not as marketable as you would like it to be, even though it's more, I think it just has a higher viewer ratio than Castle in the Sky. now, it doesn't mean it had a higher view ratio back then. I mean, I haven't done the research on it, so I don't want to claim that. But like logically, it makes sense to start the studio off with Castle in the Sky rather than Grave of the Fireflies. If you're catching on to what I'm saying here. But then you have Miyazaki dropping what most people claim to be, one of the most god tier and just godsends in anime history, which is Totoro, My Neighbor Totoro, which came out in 1988. Now, Totoro to me is a good movie. It just doesn't offer that sort of masterpiece, film of the century type of thing. Like once in a lifetime, a film will come around like this. It doesn't offer that to me, I don't think. So to some people it does, but to me it doesn't. And I will tell you why. All the major strengths in this film lie solely in the art and the appearance of like otherworldly creatures just roaming about. And the off moments, when they are not present, are not as enjoyable or as strong as other iterations as Miyazaki works. I mean, obviously you can't compare it to other Miyazaki works as much as you could now compared to then, because Miyazaki had released only 3 other movies at that point. But if you look at it now, I think that his later works are just far stronger, especially because like this is, I don't really want to belittle it and say it is, a worse product because it is a children's movie, because children's movies are often some of the most endearing. I think that Ratatouille, although a children's movie, can offer you so much as an adult audience member that it's not even questionable to even say it. But as an adult, and when I watch My Neighbor Totoro, it just doesn't scratch my back the way that a movie like Ratatouille would in terms of its ideas. Right? You have 2 kids involved in a very magical and majestic, I guess is the best way to describe it, plot, and they're sort of just like having their childhood be a little bit more spontaneous than it normally would be, and it feels like an imagination super dump of just a bunch of different things, and they're just having fun, having a good time, but it's just kind of like it's whatever, they're having fun, but am I having fun? That's kind of the thing. It doesn't feel like I'm having fun with them. I'm not in on the fun. That's kind of something I don't like about the movie. It just feels like I'm excluded as an audience member, because they're kind of just like, I don't feel like I'm on the bus or on that cat bus they went on. I don't feel like I'm flying with them through the air, or growing that massive tree that they grow. It just kind of feels I'm like their I'm a part of the dad audience, where I'm like, I don't really know what's going on, but if I was high, I'd probably like this film a lot more. In fact, if you're high, you probably like a lot of things more. But that's besides the point, right? I think this movie offers a lot, far more than Castle in the Sky ever did, and far more than actually, later works of Studio Ghibli will as well. Because, as I said, Studio Ghibli is best when it's at its fantastical elements, right? Keep that in mind, because that is a very important point. Anyway, the next work, also a Hayao Miyazaki movie, is Kiki's Delivery Service, which I initially thought was a 9 out of 10, but then I lowered it to an 8 out of 10. Because when I put it against a movie like Princess Mononoke for a second, I do enjoy how most Studio Ghibli movies employ this sort of strong beginning that latches you as the viewer on really early, but then you have this really annoying thing that happens with most Miyazaki movies as well, is that you have a really lackluster falling action. And in this movie, although I thought that Princess Mononoke, and the thing that still holds back from being a 10 for me for Princess Mononoke is a very weak falling action, especially when they're running away from the deer monster or whatever. It's just kind of just them running, and who really wants to see people running around? I've already had my fair share of Hollywood chase scenes. It's not interesting. It's just sort of a time baiter. It's sort of just to artificially inflate time for a reason that is unbeknownst to me. But Kiki's Delivery Service does it worse in a very mild aspect. I thought that initially the ending of Kiki's Delivery Service was not bad, actually. I thought it was a really nice and satisfying ending because of, eventually she gets what she wants. She gets the business and attention and acceptance from the city that she desired at the beginning of the movie. But the more I thought about it, I thought about why is the ending so aggressive compared to the rest of the movie, which is, relatively tame if you really think about it. The entirety of the movie doesn't really provide you a lot of intense conflict, right? It provides you with meager conflict because that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to, create inconveniences for Kiki so that she may, grow as a person through the movie, and that's what happens. But at the end, it's kind of like she's fed character development for free. She only, sort of has this scapegoat at the end by saving this kid's life and getting on television and all this mumbo jumbo, and it doesn't really make sense as to why that wouldn't be. Why would we do this instead of having her, reach some real impact through some more heart-to-heart type of thing, right? I feel like the triumph behind that ending is often, ironically triumphed by something more simpler and less complicated, which could have just, been a simple talk with either the bread lady or the dude that asked her out to prom, or a party, I guess. I think that would have been a far better solution. But the movie in general is something of an anomaly for me. This is actually one of the more recent movies I watched because it was just more recent. That's just pretty much it. And when I watched it, I wasn't expecting much. I was expecting sort of just like, this is probably going to be a fine movie. A rather, uninteresting addition to the catalog, but good enough to make it, at least stand out. But no, it's a complete standout in a very good way. And I don't think anyone would be disappointed watching this movie because there's a lot to offer in terms of, a great story, a great cast of characters, I gotta say. Great cast. And the first part, or the first, arc, I should say, of this movie is filled with a lot of heart and an undeniable connection to Kiki. The second part is subtle but interesting character development for her goals and the people around her. And the final part is a remembrance and recovery story with, intensity and a show of bravery, which, it works, but it's not, as impactful, as it could have been. Yeah, and that is what great film. What can I say? The next film is Only Yesterday. Only Yesterday is the second Studio Ghibli film from Isao Takahata. And I had problems with Only Yesterday because the dialogue and the characters are really boring and not engaging at all. In addition to that, the music, comparatively to Joe Hisaishi, right, is lackluster and provides little to nothing at most moments. And pretty much the cinematography as well is creative and actually retains consistency throughout the film. And the artwork is nice, but considering this is a Ghibli film, it feels lackluster, comparatively. What I did latch on to in the movie is that this is essentially a story about a dreamer, in essence. And I love my dreamers. Dreamer characters are kind of something I latch on to because, they feel authentic to what I used to do. I used to, look up at the ceiling doing nothing and sort of, imagine a reality devoid of my own and sort of create my own fun with it. And I love these types of characters, but I think that in comparison to a movie like The Wind Rises, which also features a very dreamer character, it just pales in comparison all the way. I just can't help but think about The Wind Rises the entire movie because, if if I really cared enough about this movie to really latch on to this dreamer character, it just feels like The Wind Rises did it better in every way, honestly. I feel like I repeated that too much, but I think the point is getting across here that I'm a fanboy. What can I say? The only really great part about this movie is the family dynamic of the of what's her name, Taiko, as a child, because the family doesn't really feel like a family per se, and almost seems to be at a distance and disdain towards each other, and there's really no familial bonds, and there's plenty of drama to coincide with their lifestyle. It almost feels like I'm drowning in the tension of these characters, and then right when a critical heartbreaking moment occurs, we cut to laid back present time, which is annoying, very annoying. And we all know that I hate flashbacks, so for me to say I like the flashbacks in this movie and then I didn't like, them cutting back to the present is quite the statement. And I wish they, picked a better place. I think that if we started the movie, or the whole movie took place in that sort of aggressive tension building era of the main character's family, I think I would have enjoyed the movie a lot more. Um, yeah, but this whole movie is this reoccurring theme of dreams constantly being crushed for a dreamer with lots of energy and an affinity for perseverance. And this main character, is selfish, stubborn, and pretty human in the way they act. But like, nothing comes out of it though. I feel like nothing comes out of it. This all just feels like a biography, pretty much on how someone's life decisions have been made for them, and people spoke for her, and then learning to be an individual. But I kind of wish they stayed, you know, grounded with a strong narrative foundation, because they keep cutting back to all when this decision was made for her, or this, or her father, slapped her because she wore the shoes in the house. Like, these specific moments are interesting, but we never solidify them as a strong point of her at the present. Really annoying. But it's an all right movie. I don't by any means I don't want to try to portray it as if it's bad, because it's not a bad movie. It just has bad moments, and a lot of uninteresting choices made in it, but it does offer you stuff that you can latch on to, which is why I think it's sitting around a 6 out of 10 for me. Anyway, the next movie is another Hayao Miyazaki movie, and it's Porco Rosso. Porco Rosso is one of the, I guess, first movies that you really see become really weird, right? This is a very weird movie. And I'm not saying that just because like it's like all about flight pretty much. This whole movie is just flight. And characters essentially being a little bit more interesting than they used to, a little bit more serious actually than previous Hayao Miyazaki works. The first half of this movie is a joyride of thrill and music. Always love my music from these Ghibli movies, and I always love a joyride. And the second half, it takes a dip in quality and story. But I wouldn't really say it's bad. By a dip in quality, I mean there's a plane fight that lasts 20 minutes pretty much, and it's like semi-enjoyable to watch. You just have off moments. You just have not enough, or you're not hitting hard enough on these characters. You're just kind of you're leaving them ambiguous, and you're leaving them unfinished, and it just feels that like I wish I could see what exactly these characters are going to come up or what is going to come of, talking and, building up these characters, and nothing really happens. It's just sort of, thrill factor. And I love thrill factor, and it is entertaining, but like, what exactly is Porco Rosso really mean in the wide scope of things? Like, when I think about its place in the Studio Ghibli catalog, this movie doesn't really offer a what do I offer? What does this specific movie offer to the consumer or the viewer as an entertainment factor to someone's day? If someone picked this movie up and said, Porco Rosso, like, what screams creative genius, or even not even creative genius, like, is this appealing to me, right? It's a pig flying a plane, and although that sounds relatively funny, it doesn't really feel like anyone would latch on to this immediately and be like, yeah, Porco Rosso is one of my favorite Studio Ghibli movies. There are people that say that Porco Rosso is their favorite Studio Ghibli movie, but not enough people, so you really can't I really can't feel anything too strongly about it. Not because people or few people like it. I just feel that like it's just overshadowed by a bunch of other Hayao Miyazaki movies, or even just Ghibli movies in general. But it is good. I just think that it's not good enough. Could be better. Could be better. And I actually have this Studio Ghibli booklet, or I guess it's like a really large book that I got on Kinokuniya for a Studio Ghibli like anniversary or something, and it has a bunch of Hayao Miyazaki interviews, right, and like a bunch of notes on the frames, and the overall direction they wanted to take Porco Rosso, because Porco Rosso actually started as a mascot for Studio Ghibli in a way. The Porco Rosso being like sort of a side character of sort, but then he just got his own movie for a reason that Hayao Miyazaki decided to. And when I read like what exactly happened or what exactly occurred during the production of Porco Rosso and like why it exactly exists as a movie, I just came to realize that like Miyazaki doesn't really take this movie as seriously as some of his other films. Like it's just kind of I guess a funny factor. I guess I don't know how to explain it that well. It's just not. It's a bit tame. That's what I guess say. It's not. It doesn't scream ambition. The next movie that was created by Studio Ghibli was Ocean Waves, and I gotta say, this is the first movie that Studio Ghibli produced that I would classify as very bad. This movie blows chunks of poop all over the screen. This film was released in 1993 and is directed by one Tomomi Mochizuki. And I gotta say, this film doesn't offer a lot. Especially because you piss me off, Ocean Waves. I love that part of the movie where they flash back to everything the main chick said in the entire movie, because why not? They had an entire just sequence of flashback where every single word, every single dialogue that the main chick said was repeated in just sped up speed, or just cut so that it wouldn't be like I just will never get the idea of a flashback. This is just utterly the most stupid thing I've ever seen. By far, if I rank it among worst flashbacks ever, this would be, near the top, because literally it's just reused footage. I forget if it's reused. It's definitely reused dialogue, and I think it was reused footage, but god damn, like, why do people do this? I don't get it. I don't get the relationship at all. It's just pretty much here's their relationship. It's what Nagatoro and that other dude are to each other. It's just a sadistic lady trying to get whatever she wants, pretty much, and then this other dude is just wrapped into her mess, right? And it doesn't make any sense why he should be wrapped up into it, other than this is the writer's plot, right? This has no grounds at all. But then by the end of the movie, they're like, oh, we're gonna be in love and we're gonna get married. Like, I don't get it. Like, I wish I was with you, you know? It's sort of like when they get together again after a long time, they're like, man, oh my God, I knew it this entire time. Like, it just gets me flustered at how idiotic this movie just tends to be. I mean, it's not even idiotic. I would say it's just unenjoyable to watch because it's such a basic conceit. It's not even remotely original. It's just, I mean, even like basic plots like star-crossed lovers sort of type of thing, Romeo and Juliet, like, oh, we're in this family and we're in this family, are more interesting than two high school students going on a trip to Tokyo and then somehow they find love because absurdity. And it's just like there's no way, man. They also do this weird thing where they play truth or dare, right? And they're just kind of just like sitting on the bed in their hotel room because they were sharing a hotel room for some odd reason because they got to get together. And they're staying in Tokyo and they're playing truth or dare, and it was just so cringe. I was literally cringing my balls off because of how just awkward their relationship was and how unoriginal it was. I'll give you a better example of a truth or dare that actually works. You ever seen the movie Birdman? I forget who directed. I think it's Alejandro Inarritu that directed it. In Birdman, there's a sequence where they're playing Truth or Dare on the top of a balcony, and it actually has a lot of interesting tension to it, like sexual tension. You have tensions between two artists, pretty much, and you have a lot of power between the two because they're both individuals at heart. Where in Ocean Waves, there are no two individuals just battling out, in an ideological sort of fashion. It's just two people just sitting in a room playing truth or dare because, they want to find something about each other, but none of them are interesting in any way. So, like, what's the point? I mean, I can't find the point. Can you? I surely can't. Anyway, before I get gassed up on Ocean Waves anymore, we must go to another bad movie from Studio Ghibli on the hot streak. I know. Now, I know some people really love this movie, and I can see why, but I don't agree with them on just like their overall opinion. I mean, I looked at like the top reviews on this movie for Mal. It's like sevens and eights. Like, I don't think it deserves anywhere near that. But like some people, right, have this movie at like a 9 and a 10, and I'm just lost as to how that is possible. I think that Pom Poko is original, and it is a part of Isao Takahata's more balanced movies in terms of creative direction, but I just don't think it is what I expect from an Isao Takahata movie. And maybe I'm just stupid for that. I just am expecting something radically opposed to what he actually sees in his work because I have no idea what Isao Takahata's thinking. I have no idea what he presents as. I guess I do have an idea of what he presents as an artist, but like when he makes a movie like this, I can't help but be like, is this all you got? Sort of type of thing. And if that, sounds offensive, I'm sorry, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. The characters are cute and stuff. It's like a raccoon's like, shape shifting and stuff like that. But like the narrator in the movie is kind of annoying and the dialogue is pretty drawn out and just boring. It's just boring. Because this movie is hella long. This movie is like 2 hours of just kind of just like doing random stuff with the raccoons and a bunch of different types of things happening, and then there's like one acid trip in the middle of the movie, but then that's it for everything interesting about the film. It could have been interesting at several points, but we just glaze over everything and pretty quickly just without any we just pretty much without any intent, we have no intention to finish what we started on any of the points. Especially that warmonger just throughout the movie just being a total idiot, just like, we need to go to war with the humans, we need to kill all the humans, and it's just like super annoying, and we just never, like, don't even follow up on him. Like, he just throughout the whole movie, literally all 2 hours, he is just constantly hammering, go to war with the humans, blah blah blah, and he gets like such a unsatisfying ending or climax to his entire just drought of just repeating this phrase or this idea over and over again. And that is a problem I have with the movie. It's just like we're just opening all these plot points and we just never follow up on them or do anything with them. You know, again, the movie's cute, but I don't even think children can find themselves happy with this movie, to be honest. I don't really think that, if I gave this to a, maybe like 5 or 6 year old child, they would be like, wow, I really love this movie. Why goo goo gaga? Like, I don't know. Like, what does this movie offered compared to like Monsters Inc., right? I don't think this is an adult animation by any means. I think that this is more on the children's side. So like, if I comparatively give a child this compared to like Finding Nemo, Monsters Inc., one of the more basic movies, like this doesn't, scale up. This has no grounding between those two. And I don't think that, most adults would really like this movie either, seeing that it is extremely long and with very little payoff. Anyway, the next movie is Whisper of the Heart, which came out in 1995 and is directed by I forget, Yoshifumi Kondo, I think that his name is. Whisper of the Heart is by far the most annoying Studio Ghibli movie. There are really terrible movies from Studio Ghibli, and there's really annoying movies from Studio Ghibli, and this one takes the cake because for the life of me, I cannot understand this Take Me Home Country Roads motif or whatever they're trying to achieve with it. Like, for real, I don't care about anybody or literally anything that happened in this movie. This movie is just a bunch of random BS with random subplots that mean nothing. And then you also have a ridiculous romance happening in this movie for no reason other than to just make something happen, stir something up for the viewer to latch on to. But it amounts to nothing, really. These characters are just one-dimensional and bland. They offer literally nothing in terms of character drama or, just endearment to anything. You don't build empathy with them. You don't, sympathize with their relationships or past at all. It's just random. That's the best way to describe it. And then you'll, of course, have them, repeating the same song 5 times in the movie for no reason. Take me home, country roads, to the place I don't know. The funny thing is that I think the first time I heard that song being played was through the Fallout 76 trailer. And I was like, damn, this looks like a good game. And then, like, the reviews started coming out. And then I was like, damn, this doesn't really look like a good game. Maybe Fallout 76 inspired Whisper of the Heart in 1995. It actually traveled back in time and said, you know what? You wanna use this one song, and by default, it'll make the product even worse. There's one good thing that came out of Whisper of the Heart, and that is, I forget, it's called The Cat Returns. The Cat Returns is sort of a spin-off movie from this movie, and it is far better, and we'll get to that, later, of course, but yeah, that is literally the only good thing that came of this movie. I think that, as always, the art is all right. It's probably better than most of the early works, to be honest, but other than that, like, there's not a lot to latch on to. Sorry. There's not a lot to latch on to. And yeah, I think 3 out of 10 is more than fair for that movie. But comparatively, now you have one of my favorite movies of all time, Princess Mononoke, directed by Hayao Miyazaki in 1997. Now, I have listened to Princess Mononoke's OST countless times, and I can definitively tell you it is the best in the entire catalog. I love it. This OST is Gotti. I'm sorry. I know that some people like Howl's Moving Castle's main theme and stuff like that, but if you really think about it, this reminds the OST for Princess Mononoke reminds me a lot of Undertale's soundtrack, where they use the same sort of theme over and over again, but in different ways, and it just works beautifully. That's what I compare it to. Um, I think that Joe Hisaishi does a very impeccable job with this movie. Kudos to him. Um, this film is just a plethora of just interesting ideas. Of course, I'm a big fan of critiques on industrialization as compared to, the battle of nature, nature v man type of thing. And this movie just offers it in pretty much, one of the best renditions ever, especially if you compare it to Hayao Miyazaki's early works like Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind. I think that this movie does it better in terms of portraying industrialization in a negative light and also learning to combat industrialization. Um, there's not a lot to not say about this movie. I mean, pretty much you have a strong female protagonist, very awesome. You have I'm not saying that because, uh just because it has a female protagonist it's better. I think it's more interesting because, you can tell this story through the advent of and also um an oppressed group, I guess. Is that the correct diction or I don't know, whatever. I just love this movie to death. I feel like this movie offers a lot to new viewers of Studio Ghibli, especially if you're a new viewer. You probably should start with this one if you're looking to get into it. But as I said before, the main problem that arises with this movie is its falling action being ridiculously long and also just not interesting at all. Because up until that point, you just have banger scene, banger scene, banger scene, just over and over again. And then you just have like this slow, dramatic sort of falling action that almost puts you to sleep with how melancholic it is, how dreary it is. It's not, it's supposed to be sort of uh, a dreamlike intensity. You know what I'm saying? Like intense things are happening, but you're like in a dreamlike state, so it's not really that impactful. And that is my main problem with it. But like in terms of just characters and overall just aesthetic, just producing a really great story between everybody. It's just like, yeah. Well, what are you really asking for, man? Like, what are you really asking for? Not much. Uh, but unfortunately, the next movie Studio Ghibli comes out with is My Neighbors the Yamadas, which came out in 1999 and it was directed by Isao Takahata. Now, if you really want me to be frank about this movie, I pretty much could I go either way and give it a 1 or a 2. It was that bad. I I could barely sit. It took me 2 days to finish this movie. I watched the first half the first day and I was like, God damn, this is insufferable. And then the second day, I also watched the second half and I was like, God damn, that was still insufferable. It was not fun. This kind of reminds me of Pop Team Epic actually because of how its narrative or I guess just structure in general is presented to you in these very short slice of life moments, pretty much trying to get a punchline out at you or a theme out of you by the end of it. And pretty much I wasn't interested in any of the things they had to present, especially because there's no entertainment factor in any of them. There was entertainment factor in literally one scene where Dad Yamada goes to be like a superhero and like saves his kids in an imaginary plot, but like even that was just kind of boring in the way it's presented. Now, even if this movie had been a slam dunk for Studio Ghibli, I don't think anyone would have watched it. Like on Mal, this movie has barely any members and no one's seen it because it's just such a small and scarce population that it appeals to. Like the art style itself is pretty hard to watch, especially I mean, I've seen some like 70s shows like Ace wo Nere, and it is crazy how hard that show is to watch. But this particular movie in general reminds me of those trash 70s shows, which really do nothing to help you enjoy the product more, except, you know, I mean, I can say that like the production quality is better than Ace wo Nere, which came out nearly 20 plus years ago. But you really have to consider like who is this appealing to and why is this making money? And I don't know if the intent of this movie is to make money. It's more of an artistic accomplishment for Isao Takahata in a way. Maybe he thought so, but I definitely don't see it. I don't see a lot of merit to this type of work, especially because, I wouldn't consider myself a fan of animation, because if I was a fan of animation, I would be watching every type of animation, Cambodian, Indonesian, Russian, like I'd be watching everything. And I'm not a fan of animation. I'm a fan of entertainment. There's a strategic difference in that, because I like entertaining works, mostly because I like being entertained. And the most entertaining entertainment that I find is from Japan, and that is why I consume a lot of it. And pretty much the Yamadas is sort of foreign to me. It feels foreign because it doesn't feel like traditional Japanese entertainment. And maybe that is like the one interesting part of it to me. But other than that, like, there's no reason to like really watch this movie unless you're like a fan of animation in general. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like something that you'd have to really go out of your way to watch, and then you'd also have to take into account, am I going to enjoy this movie at all? So, yeah. It's a skip if you ever want to, if you ever consider watching it. That's what I think. But now we reach the 2000s. 2000s Ghibli. This is where we're really going to pop off. You go, girl. This is where Hayao Miyazaki is going to be a girl boss building his empire. Because he starts off the 2000s by releasing Spirited Away. And if you know anything about Spirited Away, people love this movie to death, and for good reason. It is crazy how brilliant this movie is. You are really not going to come across a movie with so many illustrious just ideas and artwork and also mainstream appeal than Spirited Away. This is by far the opus of a combination of both worlds. Now, you have films that overtake Spirited Away, like Your Name. Your Name, recently, I guess not recently, actually, it was like a while ago at this point, overtook Your Name in the box office. And I think that, Your Name is a good movie. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just a good time. But like Spirited Away, comparatively, is just far more ambitious and also original than just a traditional love story with a sci-fi plot to it, or sci-fi conceit to it in the background. This movie, although it does have a lot of fantastical elements, best part of Studio Ghibli, reoccurring idea, I know, you really have to understand what it actually does for Studio Ghibli as a film, especially after you've had, a couple rough patches in some places. You really need to get that oomph back to a Studio Ghibli movie. You need to really say, like, although I guess I'm not saying that Studio Ghibli didn't have the oomph that it had after Princess Mononoke, because that movie did incredibly well. But, like, it's been like a couple years since Princess Mononoke, though. Princess Mononoke was released in 1997 and Spirited Away in 2001. So it's been a very long time since Studio Ghibli, other than the Yamadas, released a high budget mass appeal film. So this is a sort of comeback for them in a lot of ways, and it was a very successful one, by far the most successful Studio Ghibli movie. And I really don't even need to talk about anything that really happens in the movie, because like, it's better off, you're better off just watching it yourself and analyzing it for yourself, because there's so many paths you can go down. Especially Chihiro, which is by far one of the best, I guess, child female protagonists in anime. And the next movie up on the chopping block is The Cat Returns, which I foreshadowed in my talk on Whisper of the Heart. The Cat Returns is a very good movie, and some people don't like this movie. In fact, my score of this movie is higher than the actual mean score on Mal out of 130,000 users. So it kind of confuses me as to, I guess Mal is not a very good depiction of what the actual movie quality is like, because Mal users are idiots pretty much. Um, but really, The Cat Returns offers a really nice adventure film, especially one that is directed by somebody who we haven't seen before direct a movie at Studio Ghibli, Hiroyuki Morita. He really hasn't directed much to my knowledge, and nothing worth really. I haven't looked into him, so I don't really want to comment on it. But this is a really fantastic adventure movie that banks off a spin. It's a spin-off from Whisper of the Heart, from a very small plot point, that really should be commended upon, because this movie is pretty much a definition, class A textbook definition of the word whimsical. It also, is a isekai of sorts, if you really want to think about it, because main character is isekai'd to another world at which she is at odds and trying to find her way back home, sort of like a Alice in Wonderland type of thing, which I like. I think I actually like this story more than Alice in Wonderland, and I would probably tout this as, the proper alternative to that, story, I guess. Um, yeah, I just think it's plain fun. Uh, my only real problem with this movie is that its production quality compared to the other movies is lackluster. I think that, if you look at the art and then you look at other movies' art, especially Spirited Away, which literally just came out a couple years earlier, is really just not impressive. Even Castle in the Sky is probably better looking than The Cat Returns, but nonetheless, you have a nice characters, nice story, pretty much everything a mainstream audience really needs these days, and also just really nice entertainment factor. Um, something really important to note is that I think that it is just a splendid wrap up, starting with, childish desires of love, leading her to a world of cats, then by the end of the movie, growing up, leading you to a world of humans, and you can take that as you will. Crazy how time flies when you're having fun. And another thing I liked about this movie, and this is the last thing I liked about this movie, is that the characters were simple but effective enough to tell a successful adventure. And, I tend to harp on simple characters a lot, some that don't provide anything. And I can argue that, the characters in this movie are indeed simple and don't provide anything, but I think that their simplicity is what makes them better than the competition, pretty much. Next movie is Howl's Moving Castle. Now, Howl's Moving Castle is by far the most controversial opinion I have, because this movie is loved to death by everyone who watches it, and I really don't understand why. It's just not as, impactful to me as other Miyazaki works when I really think about it. And I didn't even need to think about it. After I was done with the movie, I just slapped a 6 on it, and I still have the same opinion today. And I watched it like nearly 8 months ago by now, pretty much. I still have the same exact opinion. Howl's Moving Castle is a lesser work, not in animation. It is a lesser work in just creativity to me. Like, it doesn't feel as creative as Totoro, which by far it gives the user or the viewer a far more interesting and gripping experience than Howl's Moving Castle. So it's immediately better. Or Totoro is immediately better than Howl's Moving Castle, because if I compare it to a movie that's similar to it, because they're similar in proximity in terms of quality, I think I just can't help but put it lower than Totoro by that standard, and I definitely can't put it on the same level as the higher ups like The Wind Rises or Mononoke, or Spirited Away, which we just covered. The main character is sort of a cement brick of sorts. It's just like she provides groundedness to the story, but like all the other characters are just doing their own thing, and you don't really know why they're doing the things they do, other than because they've always been doing it, or they will continue to do it even without the grandma being there. So it's not as though like the viewer is lost because they have the grandma to latch onto, or the main character to latch onto. It's just that like we are indeed connected to the main character. It's just that like we're not connected to anyone else. That's my problem. Added to that is that you just have kind of a plot that kind of just like slowly meanders on, and you just don't have a lot to love about the movie as much as people claim to have loved about it. I mean, we go to a few different locations that might provide interest and might provide, more conflict, especially because the main conflict in this film happens in like the falling action for some reason. But it's a whatever movie to me. It's like it's not average. It's a little bit above average because of its artwork being, far more polished than Cat Returns and stuff like that. But like it's barely in the upper echelon, right? It's like a 6 out of 10. The next movie doesn't come out for a long time actually. Howl's Moving Castle came out in 2004, and the next movie is actually our introduction to one man, Goro Miyazaki. Goro Miyazaki is a hack director. You heard it here first, folks. Goro Miyazaki is a hack director. I don't like his works at all. You'll come to see when I critique all of his works is that I think that he is absolutely I don't even need to compare him to his father for a second. Like, I know that some people are just always comparing him to his father, but not even that. Like, let's just take him for how he is for a second and not compare him to his predecessor, which he inevitably will be cursed to be compared to for his entire life. This movie, as it stands, is the worst possible thing Studio Ghibli has ever produced in its history. 1 out of 10 bad. There is absolutely nothing to love or latch onto in Gensenki. Gensenki is a bunch of random events that happen and coincidentally occur to produce 2 hours of nothing. You have the fantastical element, which is not even used, and it was used poorly because you have a magical plot which doesn't even play into barely anything in the film until the very last like 20 minutes, where it becomes a plot point for some odd reason. And then they have the gall to just pretty much poop on anyone's parade when they're trying to talk about characters, because every single character is a stone wall. They're just impossible to understand because they just don't act like real humans. There's actually interesting Hayao Miyazaki quote where it goes something along the lines of this. My remembering of this will be butchered, but this is essentially what it says. Directors, or I guess writers, don't watch humans enough, or don't like understand humans enough, and that's why they can't write characters correctly. You have to watch humans or understand humans in order to write characters, you know, efficiently and correctly, or else it doesn't seem authentic. And that is exactly what happens here. I don't think Goro Miyazaki has ever seen a human in his life because none of the characters here act like humans. And then for some odd reason, Theru and Aren Yeager, he is absurdly um just like out there for no reason. Complex is the wrong. He's complex, but in a bad way. He has sort of an aggressive emotion towards him that is never used effectively, and is just used for like shock factor for no reason. I have no clue why it even exists. Instead, he should have just been your cookie cutter, just light novel protag, and I would have liked him like 10 times more. But no, he had to be, the savior of humanity, essentially, without being actually a savior. He was saved by other people because he's a useless hack, similar to the director that directed this. And then the female character is a joke, like literally a joke. First of all, she is like, all. I feel like this is one of the first movies in Ghibli history to include sexual assault. Am I wrong about that? If you watch this movie, there is several scenes of sexual assault. I think that in some other Ghibli movies there is, but not to the extent that this movie goes to. But like this movie is just plain offensive, like especially to the main girl, who pretty much is not even a person. She pretty much acts like a robot the entire time and is speechless. Like I feel bad for the voice actor because she had so few words to say and they were so unimpactful that she would probably could have just, went to the studio for a day, said all of her lines, and then left without retaking any of them because it was just useless anyway. Like you don't even notice who she is in the movie, even though she's a main character. It's just so goddamn boring. How how did this get past production, or how does it even get past a writer's board for that matter? Like who's writing this? I want to know. I mean, I know Goro Miyazaki did the screenplay for this, so there's no excuse. Like he has all the resources available to him, and he just flops big time rush. Got to make it big time. Like what? Anyway, the next movie is not as terrible, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time. Ponyo, Ponyo, little fishy by the sea. You know, Ponyo is by far just like a contender for my favorite Ghibli film, first of all. And also just a joyride. Absolutely just the epitome of what Studio Ghibli strove to do in terms of one, the fantastical and the whimsical. Two elements that I'm reiterating because they are the best. Anyway, I have seen this movie like 6 times. This movie is crazy good, especially as a kid. I used to watch this. I watched this like 3 times as a kid, 2 times as a teen, and I guess I'm still a teen, but like early teens, I guess. And then one time as like 16 or 17, right? And this movie just keeps getting better and better. It just provides you with such a creative, just an interesting um plot to latch on to. I mean, I guess it's not as interesting as you think it might be. It's just a good time. It's just heartfelt, passionate, and just love pouring out from every orifice of this movie. And if you don't love this movie, you need to cry yourself to sleep, because I definitely would cry myself to sleep if I didn't love this movie the way I did. Um, from the very start of the movie, you just greeted with an absolutely gorgeous palette of color and just um authentic feelings of just like you're at home, sort of like that, even though you're underwater or something. it's like, man, what exactly do you like when you really think about what makes animation great, what makes what makes anime great in general, and you leave Ponyo out of the conversation, it's just it's just blatantly offensive, I think, because Ponyo is just crazy, crazy good. It's so good, I can't even get the words out of my mouth. That's how I feel about it. It's just something you have to experience multiple times, 50 times if so, and every time I just love it even more. It's great. It's just great. And comparatively today, it holds up easily among every single thing I've ever watched. Just every time I'm comparing a movie that I recently watched, I'm like, oh, do I give this a 9? Even Kiki's Delivery Service, I saw Ponyo at a 9 out of 10. I was like, ooh, now I'm not really feeling giving Kiki a 9 out of 10 because Ponyo's there and Princess Mononoke is there. It's kind of like, ooh, do I really want to do that though? So, yeah, this is a benchmark for me, and it'll stay a benchmark for as long as I can until I, maybe move it up to a 10. I might move it up to a 10 if I watch it again and feel, it is a 10. The next movie, which came out in 2010, is The Secret World of Arrietty. Now, Arrietty is an all right movie. I think that pretty much it does the Thumbelina thing where you just kind of like have a situation where Thumbelina is, showing you how she lives and how that world she lives in is predatory because she is small. And I feel like I wanted them to hit on that so much harder and just stay with that the entire movie, but they don't. They include this plot that revolves around the human world, especially our world, the big stuff. And she lives in a world where everything else is big, and she has to rely on everyone or on humans to survive because they, have resources that Thumbelina essentially cannot have, like a sugar cube. Um, is something that she wants, but obviously it's hard to get because she has to go into the human presence for it. And like what I'm saying is that like the first half is interesting because it explores this dynamic between the human world and Arrietty's world. But then the second half leaves this perspective-based narrative and then falls apart because of a ridiculous forced conflict for no reason. And this forced conflict being the human at the house wants to capture the small people and show them off to prove that she's, these people exist. But why? Why do we have to have that conflict? It makes no sense to have that conflict. Just explore a plot between human and Thumbelina, essentially, and then what does their relationship mean and how can they coexist, or do they not, should they not coexist by the end? Should this be a moral dilemma? Should I supply and demand these little people into, living and stuff like that? Should I have to control their life? Should I be responsible for that? Or, explore some of these ideas. I feel like it's just kind of left for dead after the first half completes, and you just have a lot of, because there's this moment in this movie where it's just shock factor when the human sees Thumbelina. I don't know why I keep calling it Thumbelina. Arrietty just seems like a harder word to say, but Thumbelina is more words. But who cares, right? I just can't get over why the subplot with the granny wanting to prove their existence is even there. It's just stupid. I think that more moments like the shock factor of having the human see her for the first time and then garner interest in them is far more interesting. And I don't even think this movie is ambitious by any standard. Like it doesn't accomplish anything by existing. That's the problem I have with it too. it's just there as a catalog member in Studio Ghibli, and it just doesn't feel like I'm getting a real understanding of like what is the intent of the people behind it, like what are they trying to say. Like there's nothing really there to latch on to. I mean, they're trying to tell a good story, like uh, that doesn't even feel coherent to me. It just doesn't feel like anything is happening, right? Anyway, the next movie is From Up on Poppy Hill, which I just watched today. So my thoughts are fresh enough to give it a 3 out of 10, because From Up on Poppy Hill is a bunch of nonsense, and it introduces something that I never thought I would want to see from Goro Miyazaki, which is uh, uh, a romance plot with nothing plot combined. This man is just unbelievably untalented. What can I say? Anyway, let's go over what made this movie a 3 out of 10, because that's probably important to talk about. This movie revolves around the rebuilding and restructuring and re-entering of a clubhouse, pretty much, which has nothing to do with anything. And it's just the most random plot point of all time. Because, like, you have really basic ground level one dimensional characters that really mean nothing in any situation. And they're just kind of like muddling over, oh, what do we do with the clubhouse? Should we save it? Should we destroy it? Like, what does this even mean for the viewer? Is this supposed to be like some sort of empathy building type of thing where they're like, oh, kids in America or kids in Japan can relate to this because, blah blah blah, they relate to rebuilding a clubhouse or whatever. Like, what is going on in this movie? Okay, let me regather my thoughts here. This movie is essentially high schoolers, or I forget if they're high schoolers or middle schoolers, maybe. It doesn't matter. They're high schoolers working with advanced ideas, which is possible, right? But the way they speak is non-convincing. What do I mean by that? You have moments where they're saying really intellectually stimulating things, but since they're high schoolers, you really don't get a feel or understand why they're saying those things at all, because they're kind of like, really, would a high schooler say these things though? It seems rather ridiculous that they would say some of these lines of dialogue, especially during the debate scene. If you know exactly what I'm talking about, there's a debate in the movie, and all of a sudden the main dude starts going up on the podium, and he's like, "Yeah, the blah blah blah," in a super serious and super intellectual tone. He's just spouting all these things about, oh, the past is what preserves our future, and stuff like. It's just nonsense. Why would he, of all people, say it, and why should I feel inspired by him in this moment? Like, it doesn't take any time to build up any of these characters or give you an attachment to them. It just throws them at you and expects you to feel for them in any way. And you're like, oh, but like, what happens when I'm actually forced to see their romance blossom and I don't care about them? Well, Goro Miyazaki doesn't care about that anyway. He'll just toss it at you and see what happens. Um, obviously all the flack can't go to Goro Miyazaki. It's obviously, some of it is not his fault. Especially if you have co-writers helping you do this garbage shoot of a movie. Um, it's on them as well, but directors get all the flack anyway, so I might as well jump on the train. Um, Basically, I think that this movie by far has the worst female protag out of all the movies. Our main character provides nothing. She's a pretty much a female stereotype in a lot of ways. All she does is cook and clean, which is pretty offensive if I'm being honest. She is of zero interest at all. All she does is cook and clean and then be a trophy pretty much for the main dude who falls in love with her for an absurd reason other than they've been hanging out for a couple of days and now they love each other. Like it's absurd. Um Anyway, uh, their romance in general is kind of just cringe-worthy. It's barf-worthy. Both of them are just coincidentally with each other to a point where like it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth and it's just boring, especially because to cover the basis of their relationship not being incest, because in the movie they essentially have the same, or they think they have the same father, but then it turns out they don't. But like in the last 20 minutes they try to cover the basis of it not being incest so the audience isn't grossed out. um Basically they have a last minute exposition dump to make them not blood related, so it's like a scapegoat of sorts. Like, why? Like, you just gotta ask why. Why is that even a thing? Like, couldn't this just been solved by just saying they're not blood related from the very beginning, and they're just being like, oh, they're just in love and they're two high schoolers. But no, they had to include the whole, oh, the mother and father eloped and they ran away, and then they had this kid brought to them because this other family died, and then they give that kid to another family. Like, why? Literally, why? Tell me why. I don't understand. Why would we do this? It's so disappointingly stupid. We're almost done. Almost done. Luckily, I get to talk about my favorite movie from Studio Ghibli next, and that is The Wind Rises, Kaze Tachinu, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, his last film before he retired, but then unretired. I think that The Wind Rises is one of the most heartfelt, one of the most interesting portrayals of a pretty much a biography, essentially, ever. There's pretty much nothing in my mind that can contest this film in terms of how glorious it presents every moment. Especially, you just have top to bottom creativeness dripping. The sound effects are human noises, like the plane engines are just, is like a your lips moving like and it's just crazy. Like, who thought of that? And then you also have a really interesting plot that surrounds Jiro Horikoshi, which is someone, I feel like this movie is banking off the historical aspect that I enjoy from movies like Ford versus Ferrari, which I thought it was an all right movie, but like I love when you take a niche person in history and then sort of expand on their history to make it seem like more dramatic and more embellish it a little bit, and then give it a lot of strength in itself. And although they are a very small part of history, they become a bigger part of history because now you know about them, now you understand them better, and especially through anime. Like, if this was done through a documentary, I think it would have half the effect, especially because like there's not a lot of creative direction that you can put into a documentary because it's so grounded in realism, while this one is far more dreamlike, far more I guess ambitious. I guess ambitious isn't the right word, because it has a level of groundedness to it that you gotta appreciate, because bringing us back to base after sort of putting us in a dreamland is all too impressive to undercut here. I could go on about the Wind Rises all day, but I won't, because I've already talked a lot about it in the past. So yeah, The Wind Rises. Go watch it. It's great. It's a masterpiece, in fact. 10 out of 10. The only 10 out of 10 of Studio Ghibli's catalog. The next movie is The Tale of Princess Kaguya by Isao Takahata, and I think that it is Isao Takahata's last movie. Um, Pretty much. He's a very old dude. There's not a lot you can. Actually, no, wait, he died in 2018. I forgot. My bad. Yeah, he died in 2018. It is his last movie. But yeah, this movie is bad. Unfortunately, I thought it was bad. Listen, it's not as though it's a problem with um the art style or anything. I thought the art style was fine. I think that my problem eventually came through with just how slow it was. It was a very slow and not very jumpy movie. It sort of stayed grounded as if it was retelling a tale. It's sort of like something like an older Disney movie like Cinderella or something. It takes time to build up, has a climax, has a, rather happy ending of sorts, and leaves it at that. It's not interesting. It's just sort of like um a tale that, you may have not heard of or you need to see in animation or whatever. It's just like it's not as though I like anything in the movie enough to talk about it. Let me let me think about this for a second. Because I think that if you if you know and if you followed Isao Takahata for a little bit, especially through his work at Ghibli, you know he's capable of just something far more dramatic and stuff like that. And I don't think drama plays a large part into this movie, for me at least, because there is a fair amount of downtime and there's a fair amount of just waiting for the events that were set up previously to take effect. And I don't really like that. I kind of like to, get my points served like boom, boom, boom. Here's this, think about that. Here's this, think about that. Here's my, you know, evidentiary point that I'm creating. And I want you to analyze what that means in the context of the scene because you are interested in Kaguya and you are interested in the people around her. But that's not the case. You kind of just see Kaguya as this angelic figure the entire movie, and you're not really attached to her. You can feel for her emotions and stuff like that, and feel for like you know like she wishes she could have a normal life of sorts. She wishes she wasn't a princess, but it's not as though anyone can relate to this factor, and it's not like you need to relate to that factor in order to enjoy the movie more. It's just that you need to create urgency for the viewer to really find one entertainment value in the movie because there's very little of it, and then also find an attachment to anything that's happening in the movie. And the easiest way to do that is just make the characters appealing, at which they are not, and that's a shame. Uh, it's basically a tell not show type of narrative, and there's little attempt to connect to the viewer and instead focus on the tale at hand. And yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say about it. The next movie is When Marnie Was There. Now, this movie is also one of the worst movies Ghibli has ever produced, and I can only tell you that, or I am pleased to tell you that it's not from Goro Miyazaki, and it's from one Hiromase Yonebayashi. Now, this movie is a one. I must preface this critique before I actually get into it. And I want you to know that this is not worse than Gensenki, but it is a terrible movie. There's nothing that I like about this movie. The main character sort of essentially is just a bunch of melodrama. She just kind of serves to be she provides no spectacle. There's no heart to her character or anything around her. It's just situations of pure nothingness after another. Just random plot points like her calling out that one girl a fat pig and then never just like really it being a major part of her character because that doesn't even really matter. Like this scene, she calls this girl a fat pig because she's angry that she's being made fun of, and then at the end of the movie she apologizes to the girl and that's it. Like nothing comes out of it. The movie itself has no purpose and is just a boring concept overall. Really, I don't understand why this movie exists and why a lot of the things in this movie even happen. Marnie, who is her imaginary friend that like acts as a coping mechanism for her lack of friendship or her lack of ability to understand the world around her, is pretty much existent for the purpose of copium and projection onto the other, her imaginary friend, pretty much Marnie, as and creates her identity as a protector for some reason. And like there's really no correlation between any of these points in her actual character being relevant in the entire movie. Like the supporting cast is non-existent and provides no conflict of interest. They just say, "Oh, she's doing what she wants to because that's what she needs to be doing." Like this movie claims to be something of a tale of self-realization of sorts. That's what I think it tried to portray. And although it does like sorta bring interest to that idea, it's not as though anyone's gonna care about it at all because one, you just have um like random things floating around. Uh I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of like what even are the themes of this movie? When you see like Hayao Miyazaki doing flight in every movie as one of his major themes, it's pretty obvious. But what exactly glows in a work like this? What exactly just happens in a work like this? Really nothing. You have no really major themes or motifs or symbols to latch onto. It's just sort of like these characters that are here, and they don't provide anything. Not to mention the last 15 minutes, which is just flashback, which is my favorite. Love flashback. We're just living in flashback land for no reason, which pissed me off, of course. God, it's just not worth it to talk about movies like these, actually. So, well, what can you do? 1 out of 10. And finally, we're at the end of the rainbow here, finishing off with Earwig and the Witch. Now, Earwig and the Witch is a Goro Miyazaki movie, already off to a bad start. But hear me out, it is not as bad as Ged Senki. It's not as bad. Could you believe it? I think that this movie had a bit of a heart to it, if I have to say. A bit. It's definitely more creative than its predecessors. Not any of actual Studio Ghibli. I'm just saying Goro Miyazaki. It's just stronger than its predecessor, creatively. But there's really um nothing to like understand in this movie other than it's just a class D narrative at which this little girl is learning to grow up a little bit and become a member of a family because she was an orphan before, and she sort of doesn't want to have a family yet. And there is some heartful merit to that, I think. But like most of the dialogue in this movie is just nonsense and just boring overall because like nothing of interest happens for a really long time and it's sort of just mundane for a large part of the movie. Um, the writing is just far too conceited and lackluster. I think that one thing this movie does not have, although it does have heart, it doesn't have passion of most Ghibli's, and that is a problem. I think that one of the gleaming elements in a lot of, or I guess most Ghibli movies is just passion glowing from the people that created it. Like you can argue that this new direction for Ghibli, especially with the art style or animation style, I should say, that the movie tried to take, is ambitious in a way, especially because it's hard to market something like that. It's hard to grasp onto a Studio Ghibli audience in that fashion. But like nobody watched this movie because of the art style, I'm assuming, and also because it's a Goro Miyazaki work and it doesn't bring the traction or bring as many viewers as you want into it. But like I have no idea like who is this movie marketed for other than like very specific kids, you know? You really have to like consider who is this marketed for and like why is it being marketed towards them and like why does this product exist first of all. This kind of reeks of a little bit of a contrarianism, I have to say. Like they're trying to implement contrarianist ideas into like little kids trying to become rock stars or something like that or go against the grain when it doesn't really make sense in the movie why you would go against the grain. I guess it makes more sense in the movie, and I'm also just extremely tired from recording this in one take. But yeah, there's not really a lot to say other than like there were a few funny moments, but there were a lot of boring moments. And truth be told, it's definitely just not worth your time to just check this movie out because like what exactly am I getting provided here? Not a lot. Anyway, that is the entirety of Studio Ghibli's catalog, criticized and talked about by a one-man show in one take because I'm an insane maniac. Um, yeah, we gonna be all right, man. We gonna be all right. Can you hear me? Can you feel me? We gonna be all right. Damn, bro. Ah, so tired, bro. It's okay. It's okay. Um, thanks for watching. You even watched it, you know. Bye.